This is Christopher Blankenship, and this is my VOPP on the United Arab Emirates for pediatric nursing. For my first slide, I have what are some birth customs? Emirate birth customs typically stem from religious and traditional customs that have been passed down from different generations. During the first week or 7 days after birth, the baby's head is shaved, and the weight of the hair that is taken off is donated in silver to a charity of the family's choice. This is called a kika. Also during these 7 days is when the baby is given its name. A very common food that's served during these times is lamb, served to all the guests. On my next slide, I have child rearing practices. For citizenship, only children born to the UAE fathers gain natural citizenship. So if the mother is a citizen of the country but the father isn't, then the child does not have natural citizenship of the country. When raising these children, education is taken very seriously. The country has very high literacy rates. For non-UAE born children, they're still affected by the local standards and expectations, but community schools are offered, and they have different syllabuses, vernacular language systems, meaning they have different languages for different students. It's very diverse. On my next slide 4, I have childbirth perceptions. There are many different perspectives on the raising of children in the UAE. Although the UAE has strived for an egalitarian relationship between women and men, disparities still exist, and I will get into the gender differences in a later slide. But there was a study done on the concept of having children in the UAE, done on a small group, and in that study, 50% support the traditional marriage customs that the country already has. 30% considered motherhood is the most important thing for a woman, and a very small percentage supported more economic independence for women and husband involvement, meaning husband doing more chores, taking care of the baby while the mother's out. There was also a very strong preference on having sons over daughters as well. Going into slide 5, we have educational systems. This comes from UNICEF, and according to them, the entire population of the UAE is literate. As I mentioned previously, education rates are similar in boys and girls because there's a high focus on education and raising children. And also mentioned community schools for non-citizens offer cultural schooling for easier integration into their home countries. There is a little bit of skepticism. There's been some skepticism on the types of education offered to boys versus girls. Typically it's known that there are equal opportunities for both genders, but there is some skepticism. Slide 6 is about trafficking prevention. Child trafficking and women trafficking is a big thing in this country, but the UAE has made many steps toward the prevention of child trafficking as well as trafficking of humans in general. Some stipulations they have is that if a person is aware of any form of child or human trafficking and they do not report the crime, then they are equally as liable for punishment. They have several shelters for women and children to serve as rehabilitation and a shelter for the victims of trafficking, as well as working closely with neighboring countries for the prevention of harm to its women and children. For slide 7, I have healthcare systems. The UAE offers a comprehensive government-funded health service alongside a growing private sector. They're both regulated at the federal and emirate levels. I have comparisons between the UAE and the U.S. The UAE's form is more government-centered and involved compared to the U.S., which involves more private healthcare systems. A lot of the healthcare in the UAE comes from the government. Although there are private sectors, it's typically government-funded. For common diseases on slide 8, the UAE has worked very hard to completely eradicate certain diseases that are fairly common in other countries. I have some examples included. Some big ones are malaria, measles, and poliomyelitis. They also focus on a lot of vaccination and prevention to prevent a lot of health disparities in this country. Vaccination campaigns are placing an emphasis on protecting against things such as chickenpox, pertussis, and rotavirus, which are also fairly common in the United States. The country also provides clean water sources offered to 100% of the population in an effort to prevent disease spread. And 100% of these are utilized. It's a very healthcare motivated country. For slide 9, as I previously mentioned, I would get to the gender differences in this country. Women are generally treated equally to men in the UAE. They take great pride in their gender status progression, as well as the UAE is ranked first in the MENA and 22nd globally on women's financial inclusion, political participation, and justice. So that's a huge step forward. 77% of Emirati women enroll in higher education after secondary school, and they make up 70% of all university graduates in the UAE. So that's a big portion of graduates for university that are women solely in the UAE. The literacy rate, as I previously mentioned, is a really high percentage in the UAE, but the literacy rate of women in the UAE is 95.8%. So just shy of 100% of women in the UAE are literate. For courtship and marriage customs, this one's a little lengthy. In the UAE, the traditional wedding lasts 7 days, beginning with the Al-Kutha proposal ceremony, where the groom's father asks the bride's father for her hand. This is followed by the Al-Aqd marriage contract agreement, which is stipulations of the marriage, all of that, expectations. Once the wedding date is set, the bride rests at home for 40 days, being pampered with healthy foods, traditional oils, perfumes, and flower extracts for her hair. A lot of these are provided by the husband, but also as well as other members of the family. These rituals are meant to help her look beautiful and graceful on her wedding day. There are separate ceremonies for women. A lot of things in the Arab countries are not being seen by the other male gender unless you're married to them. So separate ceremonies for women are provided to avoid being seen without the hijab. For slide 11, this is the major ethical dilemma. It's a little sensitive topic, but a major ethical dilemma regarding pediatrics and children, and overall the topic of thereof, is abortion, because it's done a little bit differently than most places. Abortion in the UAE is generally permitted, but there are certain guidelines to be determined. These women can request an abortion during the first 120 days of pregnancy, and within this time, a committee of healthcare professionals examines the requests. And if they decide that the request is viable, then the woman can undergo the procedure. If that procedure is determined to be allowed, then it's performed only by specialists, OBGYNs, in licensed healthcare facilities. To further take a look into circumstances warranting abortion, the UAE states that abortion is permitted when the carrying mother's life is at risk, or if the fetus has a severe deformity that could alter life quality, which could be very controversial in other countries. About 73 million abortions take place around the world annually, accounting for 29% of pregnancies each year. To further go into the ethical dilemma, looking at it objectively, it seems to cater to the overall beneficence of the mother as well as the unborn fetus in terms of quality of life by setting guidelines that I have mentioned before, such as, the risk for the mother's life and to the quality of the life of the fetus. So it's really looking out for quality of life of both, as well as potentially saving one. On the other hand, the use of a committee of licensed professionals to determine allowance of the procedure can call for a lack of autonomy by the patient themselves. They're basically taking away the right to do what the woman wants with her body, which is what makes this so controversial. With this decision being determined by a group outside of the patient themselves, even though they're healthcare professionals and have dealt with ethics, it always runs the risk of personal bias in the decision made by these professionals. So it can go either way to look at it.